stop this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello. Good evening and welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You are on Damn Radio. Here we are at damnradio.com/live for your listening pleasure. And we are coming to you live from the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art studio. And you can phone in should you feel the desire. I might even answer. 573-746-8020. Some pretty hilarious events of today. There's some things going on. And I normally don't do this because, number one, it's not international. I suppose it could be, but I like the international stuff. I think JR does a fantabulous job of giving us all the news and events and hilarity of the day. From the national side. Sometimes I get into it and I complain because they're all a bunch of wankers. That's an international word. If you don't know what a wanker is, perhaps you should find out. But I couldn't resist this one because this one just came out not long ago. Maybe JR had it earlier and I didn't hear it, but it says it just happened on October 15. And it's a Nancy Pelosi clip. It is Nancy Pelosi telling a reporter to shut up. So that word, for our Russian word of the day, we're going to tell you how to say shut up in Russian. And that is one word, zatknis, meaning shut it, basically. Zatknis means shut up. And it's rather rude, similar to shut up. And here you go. You get to listen to her tell this reporter. And I haven't been able to figure out the volume on this, so I hope it's not too loud. It was pretty loud in my ear. So let's see what happens when I play it.
Congresswoman Pelosi, are you at all concerned that the new January 6th committee will find you liable for that day? Are you at all concerned about the new January 6th committee finding you liable for that day? Why did you refuse the National Guard on January 6th?
Shut up. I did not refuse the National Guard. The president didn't send it. Why are you coming here with Republican talking points as if you're a serious journalist?
The American people want to know. We still have questions. Thank you.
We have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have.
Uh-oh. Did she say they had
You're
responsibility?
going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the
She's got a mask
inaugural
on.
Stuff.
This is old stuff. This
should
part we
call
know
the
we've
Capitol
heard.
Police. I mean the National Guard. Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
They thought that they had sufficient
No,
resources.
that is not a question of how they had. They don't know. They clearly didn't know, and I take responsibility for not having them just prepare for more.
She's crazy. So, well, maybe she's not crazy. Maybe she's just a loony bin. Maybe she's just off her rocker. But you know what? The fact is that they get in there and they stay and they never freaky leave. They just never leave. It's like they outstay their welcome. They get fantabulously wealthy, and it drives me farging bananas. I do not like this. I don't like it one little bit. I just don't. So I was listening to a lecture by Andre Bezrukov, and it is called Strategic, where is that one? But it's in Russian, so you don't get a listen. And what I did was I made sure to get that thing, get the whole thing for us, hopefully in some of his words, and there it did show up. So basically, this is some good stuff. Because he gave his lecture was called Strategic Foresight from Signal to Decision. And what he argued, why he argued it, the facts and examples he cited, and his concrete recommendations for Russia, and what happens post-transition of all of this, because he's very well spoken, and I like to listen to him. Let me give you a hint, and we're not going to get it till later in the show, but I'll give you an executive summary, let's call it, a one-paragraph core claim of what he is saying. He's saying the world is entering a once-in-a-century technological pivot. Now, we've heard this from other people, too, that say that, remember me talking about this even several months ago, that said that that the differences you are seeing now and the speed at which technology is going to advance is going to be extremely great in the next 10 to 20 years. You're going to see moves like you saw only when the telephone, the automobile, the airplane, when all of the radio, all of these things came just bombarding upon us and changed the face of the planet. So he's making something similar, a similar sort of comment. And he said, it's once in a century technological pivot, AI, genetics, new energy, industry stacks, comparable to 1890 to 1914 shift that reshaped economics and geopolitics. And the big players are already racing to write the rules of the next cycle. Now, I've argued myself that Russia, India, China are going to be at the top of this, not only because of the huge expanse of territory that they cover, but and all of the massive resources that Russia has, but the population that they have and the momentum. They are the next cycle. Now that's just me, and I have an economics degree, but I'm not at the level, of a Jeffrey Sachs who's argued something similar, or at this guy Andre Bezrukov, which Bezruk means no hands. He didn't have any hands, and so Bezrukov. It's just like in America, we have last names like Sandman, or last names like I don't know what, Miller. What is a miller? It's the guy who mills, right? And but they have the same thing, guy with one hand. And anyway, he expects fragmentation into competing techno-economic blocks and a very turbulent transition, including an extremely deep economic crisis. Now, I tend to believe this or feel the same way. We got an economic crisis coming. The dollar's going to collapse, in my opinion. And it's, we're going to want that gold backed. We're going to want something else. And I believe the rest, we're going to wish that our fearless leaders had played this a little bit better than they have. And anyway, he also alleges that a fight along the southern rim of Eurasia, where new industrial capacity and massive middle class has arisen. Russia might use its own strategic foresight to build a billion-person economic technological space with their partners, India, Iran, Southeast Asia, China. Standardize platforms, invest in critical technology, chips, radio electronics, AI, aviation, and hardwire scenario thinking into state management. He wants to forecasting in this. His framing is a memory of the future. You plan not to be right, but to become adaptive and make better decisions sooner. It was an interesting hour-and-a-half long speech that he gave. And so I've kind of summarized. That's the executive summary. And we're not going to get to it because there's plenty of other interesting, happy crappy to get into tonight that we wish to get to. And I have a lot of stuff to cover. And it's going to be fun. Why? Because I said so. And I'm going to have fun whether you do or not. How do you like them apples, friends and neighbors? Let's see. What else did I have in my history channel here of my YouTubes besides Nancy Pelosi snapping? We had something else quite interesting on the old Trumpster. And this one is a very short, and I might play it twice because I found a short one, and then I found one that was a little bit longer that kind of got the whole part of it. Because this, I can't really control. It's only a short, and so you don't get to see the whole thing, which is driving me crazy. But here, let me see if I can drag that back. Because basically what he is saying is about BRICS that he is saying. JR may have already played this. If he did, I'm sorry to repeat. But guess what? My program, talk about what I want. And he's talking about BRICS. And I don't think he's telling that, I see a Pinocchio nose growing there. This is not accurate, friends and neighbors. But let's try it anyway. Just because it's the Trumpster and we like to listen to him. But I think he has a tendency to speak first and find the facts later, which is sometimes happens. So let's listen to what he has to say.
I told anybody wants to be in BRICS, that's fine, but we're going to put tariffs on your nation. Everybody dropped out. They're all dropping out of BRICS. BRICS was an attack on the dollar. And I said, you want to play that game, I'm going to put tariffs on all of your product coming into the U.S. They said, like I said, we're dropping out of BRICS. Dropped out. They're all dropped out. They're all dropping out of BRICS. I told anybody wants to.
There is nobody that has said that. Nobody. I did a search for this. I tried to find it. Somebody, please find for me one country who says they are dropping out of BRICS. I've been looking ever since I heard this late last night, and I got nothing. There's nothing there. And they're saying that people are leaving. He also said, another Pinocchio, in my opinion. We'll wait and see what that says tomorrow. But this is a Pinocchio. He said, let's see if I can find it, because that was in a different clippage that he gave us. And we'll get a little bit more into it as well. But I want to play this. There's Pelosi again. Oh, that's one unattractive woman. You know that? Let's see here. And maybe it's just because, do you know what? Sometimes you just look at a woman or a person and you're just repulsed. Okay? That's a repulsive woman. Just like Hillary Clinton, I cannot stand it. I can't stand to look at them even because they don't tell the truth. I don't think they even believe what they're saying. That's the problem. As you sit and you watch them talking and you're going, if you weren't in public, you wouldn't say that. If you were talking to, your loved ones or in a private place with somebody that you were strategizing with, you would say something different to them than you're saying to us, even now. I think it's nonsense. So we're going to go now, and in the first part of this, and I'm not even sure where the Modi thing is, but it comes up in here in a minute. And but the old Trumpster, and in the first part, he talks about BRICS again. So, and you'll get the full quote of what he was saying about people leaving. And so let us start and see and I'll let it play for a little while just because he's amusing anyway. And let's see what he has to say. Because he also says that Narendra Modi has assured him that India will no longer be buying Russian oil. Curious. That is a complete turnaround. Why would India engage in a complete turnaround? You think they're doing it because 25%, 50%? I don't think they're doing it at all. And I'm a doubting Samuel, as many of you know, and so I need something more than Trump just saying it. Okay, I don't believe that people are bailing out of BRICS. So far, nobody has shown me that. And I went and checked all the BRICS web pages. Indonesia was the last to join back in like February or March or whatever it was. But there hasn't been anybody bail out that I'm aware of. Nobody's gone. Nothing that I've been able to find says that people are leaving BRICS. So, sorry, Mr. President. Happy birthday, Mr. President. No, but I need proof. I need something more than a guy saying it. I need a little bit more. But anyway, let's listen to the story of what these two are saying, whoever these people are. One's Trump, him I recognize. The other guy thinks, is that Patel? I think he was having an FBI briefing, but I really don't know. Listen to this. Ready?
Facts, not trading in conspiracy theories.
Okay.
Mr. President, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In light of China's export curbs on rare earths, do you view India as a reliable partner going forward? And are you planning to meet Prime Minister Modi in Malaysia? Are you open to talks in terms of
Yeah,
trade?
sure. He's a friend of mine. We have a great relationship. He just said that 2 days ago, as you know. We have a great relationship. No, we were not happy with him buying oil from Russia, because that lets Russia continue on with this ridiculous war where they've lost 1.5 million people. By the way, Russia's lost 1.5 million people.
Isn't it amusing that he's now talking about Russia losing people, and he's no longer focused on Ukraine, who estimates are far greater than 1.5 million for them? Very odd, because he was not too long ago saying that Ukraine has lost at least that amount of people. Now he's not saying it, and he's putting it all on Putin because of what? It's the only way this war is continuing to go on is because India and China are buying their oil, right?
Soldiers mostly. This is a war that should have never started, but it's a war that Russia should have won in the first week, and they're going into the 4th year. And I want to see it stop. So I was not happy that India was buying oil. And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia.
So today, Narendra Modi told our fearless leader, and I say that for real, he is fearless, but told our man in the White House that we are no longer buying Russian oil. That's what he said. We will not be buying oil from Russia. Somehow I doubt that to be true, and we shall have to see what happens tomorrow. And I've gone out and I've done a search to try to find any supporting evidence of this. The only supporting evidence are people like 12, 14 channels repeating what Trump said. No comments from Jai Shankar, no comments from Modi himself, no comments from the, what do they call it, their external affairs, MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, nothing. We don't have that. And so, sorry, but I have to see that before I believe it. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying there's no confirmation of that yet. Let us continue.
That's a big stop. Now I got to get China to do the same thing. You know, that is relatively easy compared to what we just did over the last week in the Middle East. Middle East was 3,000 years.
Yeah, I don't care about any of that stuff. Not that I don't care, but you know, I have a set of topics related to India, related to BRICS, and related to things I want to talk about. We may come back to this, possibly we will come back, but I'm not positive. Okay. And we're going to jump around a little bit today because I also listened to Maria Zakharova. She had a 3-hour briefing, and I listened to a good chunk of that today as well, which was a lot of fun. And, you know, she's always fairly entertaining, let's say, in some of the things that she talks about. Let's see. I want to, where am I going to go? I have so many places to go that it's rather comical where to go. I wanted to talk about one thing from last night's show. So I had to, because I was going a little loopy on this, and I went into it in two different ways. First, I went into the remember JR told me I should get on and do some research, whether it's AI or any other way. And I'll tell you how this went off, okay? I did a bit of a search, and first of all, I asked the AI goddess. I don't know why, but I have her speak to me in a female voice, and maybe I just like that. I don't know. Maybe I want somebody to tell me things in a female voice. And I asked if I was just a lunatic, or maybe it's possible that the caller was a lunatic, and that you can't just take a Tomahawk and throw it into the water and have it take off on its own. Do you need a launcher? And so I did a little research. So yes, I thought I had done all the appropriate research on them yesterday, and I must admit that I haven't been familiar with missiles for quite a while, because I haven't been liquidating them, as we used to say in when I was in the business, as it were. And guess what the word is for liquidation in Russian? Oh, this is difficult. Likvidacji. Likvidacji. It's liquidation. And so my old Russian instructor would always say words that are the same in Russian as they are in English, like telephone. He'd say this at the end. Oh, Sam, did you know that starое русское слово, that's an old Russian word? Because according to him, the Russians invented everything first, right? And not the other way around. They didn't take our technology and change it around. Do you know what's really funny? And I'm totally all over the map today, but it just reminded me of another thing. I was over there. Oh, geez, one of the first times I was over there. And a cartoon came on TV. And guess what this show was called? And I've never researched it. Never. And I'm afraid to. I haven't done it. But it's a cartoon show, and it's about a bear and a piglet and an Eeyore, and they have all these things. And guess what the name of the show is? Winnie Pooh. Winnie Pooh. Winnie Pooh. And it's Winnie Pooh, and he has a lot of the same adventures. And he's been around for at least an equal amount of time. Some of their earliest cartoons are of Winnie Pooh. And it made me think, man, this is horrible. Now they've got me thinking that maybe, what was it, A.A. Milne, was it, with Winnie Pooh that took it over here? And I don't disbelieve that. I'm sure it was, some Russian guy stole it and took it over there. I don't know. But they have Winnie Pooh and we have Winnie the Pooh. And they were nearly the same. But it didn't say the name of the author of the stuff on their cartoons. And so I found it rather interesting. Anyway, back to the Tomahawks, because we got to go back to the Tomahawk a little bit for our show tonight. Because the short answer given to me was that I, surprise, surprise, am not crazy. I am not crazy. You probably can't just throw them into the water, and they will self-launch. Tomahawks do not self-launch if you drop them in the water. They absolutely need a purpose-built launcher and canister and a fire control system to work. And here's why the idea of throwing them in the water and letting them go just doesn't hold up. Because the canister is the launcher. Every Tomahawk you see on a ship, a submarine, or on a truck sits in a sealed, canisterized round with a booster, rails, umbilicals to connect, and environmental controls. That canister provides power, communication, and a safe mechanical interface for ignition and separation, meaning no canister, no launch. That's point one. Point number two, mission data and crypto have to be loaded and verified. And this is why the U.S. providing this data is entering the war. That's what's happening. Not that they're not already in anyway. But a Tomahawk cannot fly without a full mission load, route, altitude, corridor constraint, no fly boxes, and crypto keys, like you see on, turn your key, shooting off a nuclear weapon. You got to have a key, right? That is done through the Tomahawk fire control system, which is shipboard or on the Army's ground systems. You can't just turn it on. It has to be controlled, okay? Number three, alignment and arming logic. Pre-launch, the missile's navigation system needs INS GPS alignment. Arming requires a strict chain of consent, interlock, environmental cue, acceleration timing, safe-to-arm logic programs. These are provided in a controlled sequence by the launcher and the fire control system, not by the depth of the water you drop them into. Okay? Number four, physics itself means this is impossible. This is actually probably the only one I got right without looking into it. But it needs a guided boost in a known orientation. The Tomahawk leaves the canister under a solid rocket booster thrust, like any missile, right? Then it deploys wings and starts a turbofan. A free floating round in the water would just tumble, ingest water, or break long before stable flight. Sub-launched Tomahawks aren't loose rounds. They are encapsulated and ejected from a torpedo tube, which I said last night, in a controlled way before the booster lights up. Okay, number five, safety and handling. A launcher exists to keep crews and bystanders alive. The safe pins, the umbilicals, the thermal control, the command destruct, the misfire procedure, and blast and fragment shielding are all there. Drop it in and hope it lights up would fail every safety and legal standard on Earth. And the cost reality, okay? The cost reality is this. A $100 million launcher conflates the whole battery. Launchers plus command vehicle, plus comms, plus spares, plus training, plus canisters, plus missiles with one single truck. Okay? So you have to have this $100 million launcher system, which includes all of that, right? But even a cheap single cell concept, which they don't do anymore. I told you the Marines got rid of it and the Army never implemented it in the first place. It still need a single cell concept. One missile would still need power, communications, alignment, direction and thrust, fire control, and a certified canister. That's the price of making a complex weapon reliably, repeatably safe. And the bottom line, you cannot have a Tomahawk without a launcher, is correct. Just dropping it in the water sounds like a mashup of how submarines launch missiles from tubes and encapsulated rounds, and how VLS Typhons fire from strike-length canisters. In every case, you have to have launcher plus canister plus fire control. Those are non-negotiable. And I found it very interesting because every once in a while, usually about once a week, I will find a. I assume everybody knows who this is, but I don't know. I could be one of the nuts that does, and maybe a lot of people don't listen to him. But there's a guy who has a channel, and he's interviewed all the time by other channels, and his name is Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and he's been talking about these topics for a long time, about Ukraine, about Russia, about all these things. And just so happened that today I was listening to his show, and he, guess what he was talking about? Tomahawks. And what he said was the following. Let's see. Here's what he put. He had Tomahawk remarks. Where'd he go? What he said about Tomahawks was somewhat similar to what I said. The no canister, no fire control, no launch. And what he said, not that the Tomahawks, if given to Ukraine, will not be any sort of strategic game changer. He called the Tomahawks, and I never thought of this part, but I mean, it's not that I didn't think about it. I didn't focus on this part. He called Tomahawks an old system. It still has its uses, but he says that it'll never settle the war, and that Trump and Zelensky are overestimating this missile and underestimating any Russian response to it. I can see that, and I probably agree with it. Range and punch, as he said it reaches a little further than 1,000 miles. And I think it's a little less than 1,000 miles, according to what I recall about it. And then he said it carries a 3,300-pound warhead, but I think he's wrong in that. I thought it was 1,000-pound warhead, but maybe it's 3,300. Maybe he's right and I'm not. But he says the air and sea launched uses for Ukraine, just like I said, are out. That they can't launch from the air because they don't have aircraft, and those are not in existence anyway to launch Tomahawks. And sea launched uses, they don't have anybody. That would definitely have to be America that did it. And so he said those are out. And the only way they could do it is a ground-launched system as the only practical path for Ukraine. And then, surprise, surprise, what did he get into? Ground-launched systems. And he said those are boutique at best and have to be run by the United States. He described the Army version as a boutique weapon modified for U.S. ground forces, but really they were only modified in the Philippines. And he's stressing the mission planning and execution would lie entirely in U.S. hands, which is just what I said and what Moscow keeps saying, too. That you can't do that. The only people who could fire them are the U.S. They know their missiles. They were involved in the INF Treaty, too. And so they know how these things get fired, and they sure as hell, you don't just hand a piece of paper and a missile on a pontoon boat with a piece of paper saying, here's how it's going to be targeted. It doesn't work that way. So Moscow has said that if any strike by a Tomahawk is a strike against us by the United States. The end. Okay, so containerized deception and a barge idea. I found this funny as hell because this is JR's idea for a pontoon boat. But it's not a pontoon boat, and it's a really freaking big one. But what he said that you could put a 40-foot missile in a box container concept that could be mounted on a barge and fired from the river with other containers as decoys, so that they don't just come out with this 40-foot missile box and have it immediately blown up by Russian airstrikes. But it would still have to have U.S. planning, and it would still be escalatory if they did this, and they'd need a number of decoys. Then he talked about the number and effectiveness, just what I said. He said he doesn't know how many the U.S. could spare. He said they're hard to make. They take a lot of time. And if around 50 were launched, Russian integrated air defenses would likely shoot most of them down, but probably not all. And the estimates are they couldn't get more than 20 to 50 anyway. Likely targets, if they did use them, would be fixed infrastructure, power grids, airfields, refineries, not moving targets. But he still doubts any real strategic effect because there hasn't been any so far with any of the other systems that they've had. He spent a lot of time on calling it a preemption risk. Any practical launch setup has to enter Ukraine and get closer to the targets, which are under persistent Russian surveillance. So if they showed up in western Ukraine to get to eastern Ukraine, they sure as hell can't come to Odessa. And if they come through Poland, they'd be in western Ukraine, and they'd be destroyed long before they hit a place where they would have a sufficient range to do significant damage. So he's saying, they would be found before they got close, which is a good point that I didn't mention yesterday. Nuclear escalation risk. Medvedev, out of Russia, former president, said that his warning was Russia can't tell in flight if a Tomahawk is nuclear or conventional. So the Russian doctrine would reserve the right to escalate. I didn't think of this either, and I didn't hear Medvedev say this, but this is what Colonel Macgregor said. He said that Medvedev gave a warning, said, a Tomahawk is a nuclear missile and can carry nuclear payload. And now I doubt that the U.S. would ever give Ukraine any sort of nuclear payload, but who knows? We'll find that out on Friday or maybe tomorrow. There was no news on it today, and we were supposed to get some kind of news on that today, which never occurred. But anyway, Medvedev said that would be an escalation and could cause a nuclear response. I think that's just fear-mongering. But anyway, the bottom line is that Tomahawks aren't going to change the war. No way, no how. And I don't know. It's not, they're no magic bullet, and fingerprints, U.S. everywhere. U.S. planning, U.S. planners, U.S. communications, U.S. mission data. Moscow would read that as Washington firing at Russia, not Ukraine. And I think it's a mistake to do so if the old Trumpster gives it. But I've claimed he's made, quite a few mistakes on some of this stuff. And maybe it is just posturing. Who the hell knows? He also talked about some non-Tomahawk topics. He talked about Trump was moving from end the war to bullying, and that he's becoming more hawkish as he goes, and he's listening to these hawkish advisors once again. And I always say that he swings like a pendulum. He turns around, changes, and he listens to the last person that he talked to. And so when he talks to Putin, he's going to come out and say pro-Putin stuff. When he talks to Zelensky this Friday, he'll come out and he'll say pro-Zelensky stuff. And, change his mind about whatever it does. And, it drives me crazy when they talk about that. This escalation, I'm not all for it. If they escalate and give these Tomahawks, well, what's to stop the U.S. from making attacks on, Lithuania, Romania, air bases, NATO, places like that, where they store and, what do they call that? When you stage and staging these weapons for delivery to Ukraine. I mean, arguably, would that be a target, do you think? Could be. We don't need that escalation, I say. Putin talked about nuclear testing recently. And they talked about their nuclear testing. You know, we should both get back into it instead of getting off of it. And what he said was, if other people are going to do underground nuclear testing, I guess we are too. You know, we have to stay current on what's going on because everybody's talking about it again. He blasted von der Leyen and Collis for repeating the London and CIA talking points. The Middle East peace optics. He says Trump's, unchanged Israeli goals. That was kind of cool today to watch all the stuff. Or was it yesterday? Whatever day it was, where they were talking all the stuff that went on in the Middle East, and all the magically all the European leaders showed up. It's like he told them, get here, so I'm going to show up. Keir Starmer shows up. That guy's, Trump tells him to jump. He goes, yes, how high? I thought it was pretty comical. One thing that I really got a little bothered at today, and he talked about this too, did our Colonel Macgregor, talked about Venezuela and regime change. And, there's going to be he talked about, and I said this too, but maybe not as clear, that there's going to be a Latin American backlash and further risk if Washington digs in Venezuela and urges deals on oil and gas instead of invasion. And then finally, he talked about these China and rare earths and tariffs, and said that, China's not going to change their tactics. That's just not going to happen. I tend to agree with him on that. I don't see China changing at all. I really don't see India changing at all, regardless of what the old Trumpster said today. I don't think that's the case. Let's see. Where do I want to go? Do I want to go to Andre Bezrukov and his speech, Maria Zakharova and her speech, or do I want to go, her press conference? That was 3 hours long, but it was pretty good. There was plenty to go on. And then what did we have here? Who are these folks? I wanted to talk about these. Where did I start today? I'm going to go to the Trump thing, I gotta revert to the story of BRICS and the collapse of BRICS because Trump said so. I did a pretty detailed search, and I found not one country that has publicly said they're dropping out of BRICS today or any other time. And there's been no official Indian, Modi, or the Ministry of External Affairs confirmation that India is going to stop buying Russian oil. What we have is Trump's claims repeated across Western outlets, and the Kremlin, and he was talking about people against the dollar, was our Trumpster. And the Kremlin came back and said, look, BRICS isn't against the dollar. We're not anti-dollar. It's like Modi has said, it's like Jai Shankar has said, we're not anti-West. We're without the West. We're outside of the West. We're not anti them. They're just not involved in this regional group. They're not involved in BRICS. Nothing like that. So it's a distinction, and it might be narrow, but it's still a distinction. But Trump claiming that and he told lots of reporters this. He was pretty blatant about it. I played that for you, but there's no Indian government confirmation as of this moment. well, right before the show, there was no statement from Modi, the PMO, the MEA, confirming Trump's version. AP noted that the Indian embassy had not yet commented. Kremlin says Moscow rejects Trump's broader BRICS narrative. So Peskov comes out and he says, and he's I don't know, a press secretary for the Kremlin. And he came out and said, BRICS isn't about undermining the dollar. It's about providing alternatives. And they've been highlighting India's ongoing purchases that have even risen in October. And then they talked about settlements and that not being anti-dollar, but that they're being paid in yuan and in Indian rupees. And it cuts against the idea that India is bailing out. This dropping out of BRICS, again, there's nothing there. India joined. Brazil has publicly reaffirmed its commitment to BRICS. The only person that has even been invited and is not fully in is Saudi Arabia. But there's still an offeree, a partner, but they haven't said no. They haven't said yes either. But everybody else that's been invited is either fully in or fully out, you know. And the only one that's in the middle, BRICS denied Pakistan entry because they're still in a conflict with India. That's the only one I'm aware of at all. And that was a couple of years ago. For context, as recently as August, Indian officials signaled zero change in policy under U.S. tariff pressure. Ministry of External Affairs said steady and time-tested Russian partnership. New Delhi hasn't said anything that I'm aware of. So the collapse of BRICS, I doubt it's imminent. I doubt that it's gone. And the Kremlin says Trump's framing is incorrect. And BRICS is cooperation focus. And RT's India desk, the Russia Today newspaper, their desk reports, like I said, higher October imports from India and alternative payments without the dollar. No halt, continuity, and until Modi or the MEA say something different, Russia says the status quo is still going. So they listened, they heard what Trump said, but so far we got nothing. We got the old zipster, okay? So I watched some of the frontline. I wanted to do a quick look at the front line. In light of what Trump is saying, that Russia's, losing all kinds of people and people are dying. In light of his comment that Russia hasn't, they didn't win. Everybody expected them to win in a few weeks. That's old news, by the way. And that said that they aren't fighting it that way. And they're not trying to win it all that way. And I'm not so sure that they've lost 1.5 million men. I know that Ukraine has lost at least 1.5 million men by any reasonable estimate. But I don't know where he's getting these numbers on the Russian side. And any valid sort of or reputable, let's say, war analyst is saying the opposite, that Ukraine has losing at least 3-1 to Russia and men dying, and maybe as high as 6-1. One estimate I saw said that it was 9 or 10-1. Now, I still believe there's a lot of young men getting killed that are Russian. Nobody knows those numbers because Russia doesn't publicize them. But there's far more Ukrainian loss of life than there is Russian. And I think that is something to to talk about. But anyway, when I was watching one of the ones that I watch quite a bit, at least to get my updates on the front lines, because they have mapping, and it's called the Military Summary Channel. I like listening to him. I'm not going to play any of it. Well, maybe I'll play the first few minutes because he talked a little bit about the Tomahawks too. I wonder if that would be worthwhile. Do you know what? I think I will play a small part of that for you. Because I like listening to him anyway. Not as much as the Pelosi monster when she's on a roll, but let's see, because he had, and I won't go all the way through. It's a long, like 18-minute clip for them and for him, and I don't want to go that far. Let's see if I can get to where he is. Okay, let us listen to a few minutes of what he has to say. Ready?
The day we've been waiting whether the United States of America will announce additional help to Ukraine, and will the United States of America provide Ukrainians with Tomahawk missiles, but nothing like this happened. Today we got report that Pentagon Chief Hexet arrived in Brussels, where a meeting of NATO defense ministers and the Ukraine Arms Contact Group Rammstein would take place, and upon arrival he called on NATO countries to allocate more funds for the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine, and that's it. So nobody announced that Ukraine will get Tomahawk missiles. Maybe this is going to happen tomorrow or the day after. Maybe today the minister Hexet was talking with European countries and leaders with the purpose to understand whether they're planning to allocate additional funds or not. So today we will not understand anything. Most likely after this meeting, Hexet will turn back to Washington, and then the President of the United States of America will make a final decision. But at the same time, we see that Ukraine continues suffering huge problems with electricity. By the end of the 15th of October of 2025, we got report that almost the entire Ukraine has no electricity.
This part is interesting, not just about the electricity, about what their plans are for winter. I forgot all about this, but pay attention to this.
Just several regions of Ukraine still have some power, and that's it. And obviously this is the beginning of disaster. We see that the Russians stopped attacking the territory of Ukraine. Most likely they also see the picture across Ukraine, and the picture is very bad. Furthermore, today we got reports that Ukrainians began preparing of buses and trucks for evacuation purposes. The Ukrainians are evacuating not just towns and settlements along the line of combat contact where the Russians are advancing. The Ukrainians began thinking how to evacuate the entire population of Ukraine from the territory of Ukraine in the direction of Western countries. And we're talking not about several thousands of people, we're talking about millions of Ukrainians. So this is the reality on the ground. Zelensky needs these Tomahawk missiles to begin attacking deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation, but it seems that he is the only person who understands this need. Most likely nobody else understands what exactly Zelensky is planning to achieve with this. Now let's discuss this.
Yeah, now he's going to talk about the situation on the front. But I forgot that part because he is not the only person that said something like this. Zelensky needs a game changer. I argue, Douglas Macgregor, Colonel, argues that the Tomahawk is not a game changer. The F-16 was not a game changer. They're all gone. Patriot missile, not a game changer. The ATACMS missiles, not a game changers. Any of the other missiles from the Western European countries, no game changers anywhere. Russia is still advancing along the front lines. And there is nothing different. Now, Russia over the last month has completely destroyed the entire energy infrastructure. There's no gas for the winter. I told you that they shortened it again, yet another month that they shortened the the gas or the heat season, when you will get heat, which is dictated by the government. Heat won't be turned on just because it's cold. It's turned on because the government says it's cold. How much you want to bet it's nice and warm in the president's living quarters or any of those places, but the normal people are going to freeze their testicles off. It's not going to be good. And this is the second or third person that I have heard talk about a massive form of evacuation about what is going on, because winter is coming and these guys have nothing. And the situation is quite bad. And along the front lines, people are just dying. I mean, that's all there is to it. There were some discussions about about the surrenders that are going. They're saying that there are people on the front lines, Ukrainian, that the only way they had water and food delivered were by drones, but that the Russians are controlling the airspace and knocking out all the drones. So the deliveries of food and water, because they can't have, when I was in the military and you were out in the field and you were playing war games or whatever, I was in during wartime, but I was a Russian interpreter. I didn't end up going to Iraq or anything like that. You know what I mean? And so I didn't see this in wartime, but I know how it worked. They, you would have, like if you had a platoon and you have 4 squads in a platoon, each squad has its duties in a different location. The platoon sergeant, 2-3 times a day, you would have 1 meal a day that was an MRE, maybe 2, and in the winter or the cold or hot, they would dictate whether you got a hot meal in the morning, you had to have 1 hot meal a day or whatever if you had, and so you would have your platoon sergeant would pick them up and deliver you these hot meals 1 time per day, and then you would have 2 MREs or vice versa, or sometimes they would have to cancel the hot meal because whatever, there was no way to get you there or whatever, and all these things came in these little cards that they opened up that were random, and they said, here's your wartime scenario, and they would follow the wartime scenario that was a random sort of scenario, right? Well, what they're saying is that in Ukraine there aren't any hot meals. Then now there aren't even any meals, because the only way they can deliver them is by drone. And the Russians are knocking out all the drones. And so these are bad times over there. And the same is true because the Russians are knocking out bridges. A lot of bridges on the western parts of Ukraine that supply the front lines are being destroyed, and all the railroads are being destroyed, and therefore none of the resupply is getting to the front lines. So this is very terrible for the people that are on the front lines, but it's equally as terrible for anybody left in any city near the front. And most of them are evacuating because they're all getting bombed anyway. And they're trying to get everybody that is east of the Dnieper River to the west part of Ukraine that wants to go. And so they're saying they got all these buses that are going back and forth and carting them back, trying to get them out and evacuate them. And they're allowing people to leave the country as well. So it's a hell of a scenario that they're going through. And on these massive power outage and mass civilian evacuation westward is with him and just a couple other sources, but no mass media is talking about it, and you won't get that from any Ukrainian newspaper. You just won't. So wherever he's getting this information, he's usually pretty solid as far as the front lines go. He's talking about Kherson, Dnipro Delta, and Kherson City. There are conflicting reports that Russian infantry tried to land on Kabul. Some maps show the south part as Russian held, meaning they crossed another river. And so they're, if they can, and then they were driven back. And if they can get back across that side of the river, this is really bad for Ukraine. Heavy clashes around Poltavka and Uspianivka, and Poltavka will probably fall within the week, is what he is saying. TASS is highlighting Russian gains on the eastern battle group, which is Novovasilovskaya, and the Yanchur River. And so they're marching. The Russians are along this and on the Volcha River. Alexeyevka is they're taking more and more places, and the Ukrainians are, backtracking pretty seriously. And so, since October 9 or 10, this show has tracked a Russian push on the southern Mirnograd arc, and the Kazatskaya, Moskovskaya, Balagan, Novopavlovka, all of these cities near Mirnograd, which are all southeast, east, northeast, to cut the southern half of the city, and they're all being squeezed out of yet another city. And Pokrovsk is, we've been fighting over that one for a while, and the Russians are already like 60% into Pokrovsk, and Pokrovsk was a pretty good size city. And Kharkiv, same thing. Sumy, is holding firm. And, per this episode, what he is saying is that momentum is still with the Russians. All the bridges are destroyed. Power grids are gone. Let's see, I covered all this stuff already. And they are just, the frontline wins of the Russians are just a bunch of them. And I don't know. If they don't find a game changer, it's going to be a long winter. But what they're saying is this is going to keep on going for several years. I know we're trying to fund it for years, which I think is nonsense. But I'm not sure where to go with this. With the war, it's freaking war. Who knows who's telling the truth on there. I did want to go into. Everybody knows. Well, maybe everybody doesn't know, but I like to listen to several people that have pretty good programs, and I was on the program with Alex and Alex Christoforou, and I forget the other Alex, the guy from England, and the other guy that's Greek, I think. And he travels around a lot. And Alex Christoforou I listen to more than I do the other Alex, but both of them have pretty good shows. And you can listen to him on a show called The Duran if you're interested. And Alex Christoforou has his own show. I don't listen to The Duran much anymore. At least not the joint ones. I listen to Alex Christoforou. And he always has a pretty good take on the news. And today he gave some pretty good news. And he's always, I like to listen to him because he's freaking funny. And I would replay a few parts of his show, but he jumps around so much that it's hard to track them all. You know what I mean? Where I'd have to sit down and say, oh, geez, at minute number 8, here's where this is. And I really don't have time for that, so I don't really do it. So I kind of take notes on what I liked on it, and then make sure to get to a couple of those points. And he gets some of the he was making fun in the start of his show. Maybe I should play the Mark Ruda place, because that was pretty funny. Ruda saying that in fact, you know what, I think I will. Maybe I'll play a little bit of his first part of his show, because it was damn comical, what he was telling us. and it was about Mark Rutte, and Mark Rutte is no genius. Let's put it that way. This guy, you wonder where they're getting their info from, in order to talk about. And he's basically, let's see, at the very beginning. Yep, it's Rutte at the very beginning that he is talking about. So let's see what he says. Hang on one second, because he's mocking Russia, right? And it's more BS. This is like that idiot Kellogg over here talking about, Russia. It's Trump calling it a paper tiger. And well, if it's a paper tiger, why do we say the same thing that you're saying about, how come if they're a paper tiger, how come Ukraine can't take them out? If Ukraine's so powerful with all these Western weapons, and we've put basically $300 billion between the Allies and us in Ukraine, $300 billion, and you still can't beat them? I mean, we could say the same thing. That's what we're doing. And so Rutte made some idiotic comments in there. You should hear them. This guy's a genius. Ready?
Russia's military is stretched there and elsewhere. Its Mediterranean task force was once a mix of surface ships, submarines and support vessels. Now, in effect, there is hardly any Russian naval presence in the Mediterranean left. There is a lone and broken Russian submarine limping home from patrol. What a change from the 1984 Tom Clancy novel, The Hunt for Red October. Today, it seems more like the hunt for the nearest mechanic. Is that they are saying, if a plane would pose a threat, we have the authorities to do, if necessary, the ultimate. But if the plane is not posing a threat, we are not going to shoot it down. And then we will gently guide it outside the airspace. This is exactly what they should do. And I totally agree with that approach, because we are so strong. Proportional response. It is proportional response, exactly. And we are so much stronger than the Russians. We don't have to take down Russian airplanes because they enter our airspace. We do it if they enter our airspace and also pose a threat. If we were weak, you might maybe think, okay, we are weak, so we have to immediately show them that whenever they enter our airspace, we shoot them down. But if they don't pose a threat, being so much stronger than the Russians, I think it is much stronger that our reaction is as it is, proportionate, and of course making clear to the Russians that we are not too happy about these incursions.
So I'm going to let you listen to Alex because he gives some pretty funny commentary on that. But did you hear that? This guy's saying, we are so much more powerful than Russia. Oh, really? If that's the case, why are you giving all your crap to Ukraine and nothing is happening with your powerful weapons that are there? Russia is defeating all of NATO, including you, Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, right? If you got all these powerful NATO weapons, how come Ukraine doesn't have them? You've been passing them out to them forever. And the Patriot isn't defending anything. There's very few left over there. I'd like to know what exactly you mean by that, Mr. Rutte. Now we'll listen to Alex because he was pretty funny on this topic.
Is my video update on this Wednesday afternoon, October the 15th, coming to you from Nicosia, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with NATO CEO Mark Rutte, who was at a NATO event discussing how to make it easier for NATO to shoot down Russian fighter jets over NATO airspace. And Mark Rutte, he said that if a Russian fighter jet is over NATO airspace and it does not pose a military threat to NATO, then what NATO should do is that they should escort that fighter jet out of NATO airspace. They should not shoot that fighter jet down if it does not pose an immediate direct military threat to NATO. And the reasoning, according to Mark Rutte, for this is that that NATO is much more powerful than Russia. NATO's military is much more powerful than the Russian military. It is infinitely more powerful than the Russian military, and shooting down a Russian fighter jet that does not pose a military threat to NATO would be a sign of weakness, and NATO should not display weakness towards a Russian military that is so much more weaker than NATO, because according to Rutte, NATO is much more powerful than the Russian military. So if there is a fighter jet over NATO airspace and it is not a threat to NATO, then escort it out of NATO airspace. And NATO should not show any weakness, because it is the much stronger military, much stronger than the Russian military. Rutte made it a point to say that NATO is much stronger than the Russian military.
Nonsense. Yeah, that's crazy stuff. But I like listening to Alex. That's funny stuff, and he has a good program. Alex Cristoforo. He's also got like 245,000 subscribers, so that's pretty cool. Good for him. I like that. What else did he talk about on his show? He did talk about the Russian Navy being down to one lone submarine. It's mockery, which they're doing, on purpose. If you remember from, and he did it in his show, just like the prior guy that was talking about the Tomahawks that nobody's talking about yet. We shall see. And the Kiev team is in Washington already, waiting for the Z-Man to show up and talk to Trumpster on Friday. And right now, that Svirdinka and Yermak and the U.S. Treasury, that guy's a genius too. Besant, he says the Kiev's team met the U.S. leadership, Scott Besant, discussing money and pressure on Russia and how to get more money. This is not good. They were going to finance the next escalation, and we're going to end up paying for it. That is what's becoming clear, and I think we're going to be on the hook. And so this war is going to end up being Trump's war, not Biden's. It'll be Trump's war. But he still likes to keep saying that war never would have happened if I hadn't lost, if I was still in office, or if I hadn't had the election stolen from me, however you want to put it. But now it's going to be, if he escalates, and I've said this about a couple of things, and I actually believe if it's not already his, escalation will definitely make it his. But that's what Rubio's of the world and who haven't I talked about in a long time? Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham wants it to be our war for sure. You want it. And so the Ukrainian delegation is already in, got their hands out. Zelensky will come here, have his hand even further out, and want to know where those where the Tomahawks? Come on, give me some Tomahawks. Give me some Tomahawks and a bunch of pontoon boats, and we're gonna take these to the creek down past the farm, and we're gonna drop them in the creek, and they'll take out them bad Russians. It'll just take them out, right? I don't know. We also got the bailout of Argentina going on to about $20 billion, and Trump is gonna, generosity depends on the election outcome, which is pretty funny, and and so whether or not Trump gives money to Argentina of the $20 billion, Depends on how the election turned out. Whew, sorry, yawning. It's getting a little bit late for me. I'm either old or tired. I suppose I could be both, but there you go. Trump saying that Putin should have won in a week. He claims 1.5 million Russian casualties and still is claiming gas lines in Russia. Trump is. And I don't remember seeing any gas lines in Russia. And I got around some in there. There aren't lines to get gas. They have plenty of gas. And I don't understand why this claim is still out there. But I think that Trump is back to Russia bashing, and I think that's unfortunate. And let's see, what else did he talk? Oh, he said something about a power move by Zelensky in Odessa by getting rid of the mayor, who's a guy named Trukhanov. And he said he had a Russian passport, and he installed instead some kind of a military administration. And but then he said that it's just a power grab to lock down the port, and wants to preempt any pro-Russia mood if the front, the war front, hits to Odessa. But I think it's already going there. You know, Odessa's always been a Russian city. And you know, there's been a lot of talk for a lot of time about Odessa transferring to Russian hands. And that part, if this drags on for several more years, I believe that Nikolaeva and Odessa will be Russian and will link to Transnistria, which is Moldova. That's me. That's a prediction I had months and months ago. And several people have also had that. I don't remember when the first time was, but I know I've thought about that for quite a while, that it could be something that could happen. I watched on the news here on all the TVs going on here in studio, and saw this, and I had actually seen it a little bit earlier in the day, and I meant to comment on it because I'm very, very much against this, but we've done it again. The U.S. sank another boat near Venezuela. It's the fifth such strike on alleged smugglers in a boat in international waters. They killed 6 people. I still say there's no reason they couldn't have stopped the boat, boarded it, shown me, even if it's only me, that there were some drugs aboard and that these were people transporting drugs, and then taking them into custody. This, in my humble opinion, is just downright un-American. You don't just go blow up a boat because somebody's drug running. You're not calling them terrorists. Well, you're trying to, but you're not. A drug runner is not a terrorist, okay? You don't get to call them a foreign enemy combatant or anything like that. It's a guy running drugs. And they might be bad people. Well, kill them while they're doing something bad besides running drugs. I'm not saying drugs are good. Arrest them. Take them into custody in international waters and prove it. That's all I'm saying. I want some proof. That's what I want. This also came out about Maria Corina Machado said something to Trump Jr. And remember me talking about this when the Nobel Prize, she's the lady who actually won the Nobel Prize, and Trump didn't get it. Well, she passed out something to Trump Jr. and kind of was pretty vocal about it. And she's been saying the same thing. I said not the same thing, but I talked about it last week on this oil and the platforms and letting U.S. firms come in and profit after she takes over as president, and the U.S. being engaged in regime change. This is how you get Nobel Peace Prizes. You get to go out as the Nobel Peace Prize winner gets to go, well, regime change then. But as long as you're U.S. backed, it doesn't matter. You know, that doesn't hurt anything. If the U.S. has a coup somewhere, nobody's supposed to say a word. And if you U.S. regime change, that's just par for the course. It's the way it's supposed to go. You know, we have the CIA operating in Venezuela. This is BS, and they're going to go down there and kill people and change the regime. That's what we do. And then all of the oil and gas and all the stuff goes. And then what do we get to say? Oh, well, Maria Machado, she can be the president then because she just won the Nobel Peace Prize. So she's one of the good guys. And she's been fighting for democracy for 20 years, right? Like she's going to be any different than, what is her name? Sandu in Moldova. Whether she's going to be any different than Zelensky or any predecessor of his after 2014. They won't be any different. All they are U.S. puppets, and we're doing the exact same regime change. Did I say regime? Regime change BS that we've been engaging in for freaking ever. And I don't like it, but that's me. Let's see. Let's see. Where are we going? I had one more. Do you remember how I started this? We had Maria Zakharova, and we had the gentleman who had the economic discussion, Mr. Bezrukov, and I talked about his forecasting. I tell you what, I wish I could provide, maybe I'll do it tomorrow night and use him as a start for tomorrow, and then talk about some of the topics that Maria Zakharova talked about, because she had quite a few of them. The first one that she always talks about, so her briefing that she gives at least once a week, and usually 2 or 3 times a week, are 3 hours long, right? And but you know, when you listen to him, the first 10 minutes is about attacks on civilians by Ukrainians. So Ukraine, they talk about this kind of thing a lot, and they like to say, "Oh, geez, Russia's killing civilians." I don't believe that, and I don't see it, you know, and they lied about Bucha, and they lie about a lot of stuff over there. And this could be political propaganda. I don't think it is. You know, they talk about the same things, and if you go back and you see it, it's the same. But basically, all of her opening segments, she says that Kiev continues strikes on civilian targets in Russia across multiple Russian regions from the 8th to the 14th of October. They killed inside of Russia by attacking civilian targets. They killed 21 people, injured 83, including 6 children. Examples she lists: October 8th, Maslova Pristan with a Grad MLRS hit a sports and health complex and killed 3 people, including a 25-year-old school teacher. 12 people were injured on the same day. Then Mashona strike injured a child. On October 9th, in Novaya Dovolzhenka, a drone injured an 8-year-old girl. On October 10th, a couple was wounded in Gorodovran. On October 10th and 11th, drones hit cars in what's this one? Khatradnaya, Maximovka, Yasnaya Zornaya, Ochkova, 4 were wounded from that. On October 12th, in Shebekina, there was a blast near a housing unit that injured 4, including 2 10-year-old boys. On Proletarsky, they had a drone attack that wounded 2. Dorokoj and Bachovka, a drone drop injured a driver of a combine, a farmer. She cited further hits in Inel by mortars, 2 bus attacks in Gorlovka. A drone wounded 7, including 2 teenagers. On October 12th, a drone wounded 6, including a teenager. Damage to a kindergarten, residential administration buildings. On October 13th, an ammo drop caused casualties in Ilkova and Gorlovka. 1 later died. In Kherson, on October 9th, Zburivka in Gola Pristan, there was shelling and 2 died. Civilians are all these. A shell killed a 49-year-old woman in Bekhteri, and another one was seriously hurt by the same strike. Novaya Mayachka, I think that stress is wrong, should be Mayachka, and UAV hits a grocery store. On October 14th, Novaya Zabrovka, shelling killed an 80-year-old woman. Near Chernyanka, a trucker was injured by a drone. She accuses Ukrainian units of looting and arson in areas they still control, and lists, they also list all the Russian court sentences against Ukrainians who are accused of crimes for killing civilians. And said that Zelensky has approved further special Ukrainian forces operations inside of Russia. And so, I mean, they always talk about that. And we never hear anything about any of that. I'm not saying we shouldn't hear both sides, but you only hear about the evils of Russia. It's the evils of war on both sides. And I'm not, I'd like to see the war over. None of us want to see people dying needlessly, and this is a needless war. She then talked about Lavrov's near-term diplomatic schedule. He's going to be in Morocco and in Kazakhstan. On October 16th, there will be talks in Moscow with Morocco's minister. Morocco's a really cool country, by the way, and fantastic highways, and I've driven all over that. I went to Casablanca. That was freaking cool, and geez, I loved it. I'd love to go back there. That was several years ago. I may need to go back. They're talking about the emphasis on the North African Sahara and the Sahara Desert out there, so there's plenty going on about that. She talked about the Western escalation and Ukraine, Tomahawks, Ramstein, Kiev's Washington push. She also talked about Boris Johnson, and I found this rather amusing. Citing a British press leak, she alleged that UK former Prime Minister Boris Johnson blocked talks with Russia in early April of 2022 and pushed Kiev to keep fighting. We already knew that part. And he may have derived material benefit from this, referencing a £1 million tie to businessman guy named Christopher Harborne, a major shareholder in Kinetic, which is said Kentucky is what I think it was. But anyway, it supplies Kiev with drones and robotics. She claims Johnson flew Harborne to Kiev for closed military technical meetings on September 23rd, framing the episode as emblematic of Western political industrial profiteering. In tandem with Kiev corruption. Her challenge? Johnson should answer whether Harborne was indeed on the jet. Her segment fits a recurring theme. Anti-Russia hysteria as a cover for the arms industry to get rich, and Western political self-interest, like Boris Johnson getting rich, intended to undermine moral claims behind the UK and EU policy and argue the early diplomatic off-ramps were deliberately sabotaged by London, by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson for his own personal gain. This is a British media story, And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs' role is to amplify it and call for some sort of response. And I tell you what, I'd like to see somebody do something like that. Too many people getting fabulously wealthy off of this war. Lots of Ukrainians, lots of Europeans, plenty of Americans just spreading that money around and watching people die. I'm against it. My name is Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. You can join me every night, Sunday through Thursday, 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. And you can find all of my past shows at internationalflavor.com or at damradio.com/podcasts. Join me again tomorrow night. Thanks for being here.
Damn Radio.